I'm hopping on with an extra video today in celebration of Jane Austen July. I've got a roundup of my favourite books for Jane Austen fans and I can't wait to share them with you. But just before I dive into my book recommendations, I have a little message for my American friends, and that is that Barnes & Noble are offering a 25% discount on pre-orders at the moment. So if you've yet to pre-order my book, the Country Commonplace book that's coming out in September, in the States it's towards the end of September, but if you've yet to pre-order it, then you might want to take advantage of their discount. So if you're a Barnes & Noble member, then you can use the discount code preorder25, that's preorder 25, and if you use that discount code at checkout, you'll get 25% off any books on the pre-order list. If you're a Barnes & Noble premium member, then you get an additional 10% off, which really is a fantastic bargain. This offer doesn't last long. It begins today, the 8th of July, and it only goes until this Friday, the 11th of July. So if you'd like to pre-order my book using the Barnes & Noble discount code, then do it sooner rather than later. And of course, please remember that I've created a free pre-order bonus pack for anyone who pre-orders my book, because I'm so grateful to anyone who pre-orders. It makes such a difference. So I wanted to say thank you by creating these free resources for you. All of the information about that I'll put in the video description box, along with the Barnes & Noble link and discount code. So do check out down there for all of the information. And also to remind you, I would love to personally thank you if you pre-order 3 or more copies of my book with a handwritten thank you card. You may want to use the Barnes & Noble code to stock up on some gifts, and if you do, then please do remember that I would love to send you a handwritten note if you pre-order 3 or more copies of my book. Just email me at info@mirandasnotebook.com with your name and your address, and I'll be able to pop a card in the post to you. All right, but let's get back to my Jane Austen recommendations now. I'm going to start with non-fiction to begin with, then I have some fiction recommendations, and then finally a few editions of Jane Austen's novels that I think are just that extra bit special that I want to share. But let's start with non-fiction and a few biographies of Jane Austen. The first biography of Jane Austen that I ever read was Claire Tomalin's classic Jane Austen, A Life. And I still think this is a really great biography to start with if you just want a good general biography of Jane Austen. This will give you all of the relevant information, and I think Claire Tomalin is such a thoughtful and brilliant writer, so I really recommend this one. 2 that take a bit of a different angle at looking at Jane Austen's life that I really like are The Real Jane Austen, A Life in Small Things by Paula Byrne. This looks at Jane Austen's life using the lens of different objects from her life. So, for instance, some of the objects discussed in this biography that then sort of trickle out to Jane Austen's broader life and the broader context of the times in which she lived. Some of the objects are the East Indian shawl, the barouche, the cocked hat, the ivory miniature, the crimson velvet cushions, and the topaz crosses. So I just really enjoyed this interesting take on a biography. And I always think that Paula Byrne is a brilliant biographer. I very often enjoy her biographies, and this is a fun one. Finally, I want to recommend Lucy Worsley's Jane Austen at Home, which is a really interesting look at Jane Austen's life, and it examines in particular the houses that she lived in, the houses that inspired her books. Homes are really central to Jane Austen's fiction, so I thought it was a really interesting lens to look at her life through the houses that mattered to Jane Austen. And I always think Lucy Worsley is brilliant. I love her writing, and this is an excellent excellent biography. Then I also wanted to share this book, A Secret Sisterhood, The Hidden Friendships of Austen, Bronte, Eliot and Woolf. So this is a group biography, but it starts with Jane Austen and it looks at her friendship with Anne Sharp, who was the governess at Godmersham Park, which is where Jane Austen's brother lived. I loved all the different aspects and the lives examined in this biography, but I did especially enjoy the section on Jane Austen. So this is an excellent read if you're curious to dive into Jane Austen's friendships with some of the lesser known women of her life, like her friendship with Anne Sharp, for instance. Then this is an interesting biography as well, in that it looks at both Jane Austen's life and Dorothy Wordsworth's life. I really love both Jane Austen and Dorothy Wordsworth, and this book is by Marion Vivers. I thought it was just an interesting take on a biography of Jane Austen, sort of linking her to Dorothy Wordsworth and examining some of the similarities and differences of their lives. And it was just a really interesting examination of the lives of two female writers. Next up are two books about marriage in the age of Jane Austen. So this is one I recently got, Love and Marriage in the Age of Jane Austen by Rory Muir. I haven't read this one yet, but I've heard excellent things about it and I'm really looking forward to diving in. This book I read a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. The Game of Hearts, The Lives and Loves of Regency Women by Felicity Day. I remember this book really covered what women who were very aristocratic, sort of very upper class women's lives were like in the Regency era, particularly examining their choices regarding marriage. And this book really offered a fascinating insight into the lives of some of Jane Austen's characters and what their sort of real life counterparts would have looked like and what choices women had around marriage at this time. It was really well written. I really enjoyed it. If you love Geette Hair too, and I love Geette Hair, then I think you would also enjoy this book, because Geette Hair writes about a lot of the type of women and characters that feature in The Game of Hearts as well. So I loved this one. A book I'm really enjoying, I've still yet to finish it, but I am really enjoying it, is Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. I started it and then had to put it down, so I had to read some other books for other projects, but I'm really looking forward to picking this book up again, because I think it offers such a well-written and truly fascinating approach to looking at Jane Austen, particularly through the lens of the books that she read and the women behind these books and how they influenced Jane Austen and her writing. Rebecca Romney is such a great writer, and I think this is a really brilliant book to read, especially if you are interested in reading a bit beyond Jane Austen, looking at other female novelists who were important at the time or who came just before Jane Austen and who influenced her work. If you want to look at that broader context of female novelists around the same time, then this is a really excellent book. Another book on a similar subject is What Jane Austen's Characters Read and Why by Susan Allen Ford. This book also looks at the authors that Jane Austen read and who were sort of important and influential to her writing. But then this book also examines Jane Austen's novels sort of one by one, and it looks at what the characters that she wrote about actually read and why that was important to the story and to Jane Austen's life as well. So I really like the way that this book sort of goes through Jane Austen's novels and really examines what her characters read. That's really interesting too. Then this is just a bit of fun, but I so recommend this book, which is So You Think You Know Jane Austen, a literary quiz book by John Sutherland and Deirdre LeFay. I adore this quiz book. If you think you know Jane Austen's novels sort of really, really well, then I think you would still enjoy this quiz book because it is very difficult. I mean, I reread her novels every year. I know them really well, but the harder quizzes in here really ask you to deduce some answers and to sort of use your own reasoning, imagination, knowledge of the period a bit in order to be able to answer them. So a lot of the questions asked aren't just basic questions about, facts from the novels or whether you can recall a specific detail. A lot of them go deeper than that. And if you're a bit unsure about the answers, then the good news about the answers to the questions, and the good news is the answers are listed in the book, and they're fascinating to read. So I just have so much fun with this. If any huge Jane Austen fan would absolutely love this book too, I am sure. You can really have a lot of fun with it, and it really gets you thinking and thinking more in depth about the novels too, and that's just something that I love. Then another book that falls under the sort of literary criticism realm is Jane Austen, The World of Her Novels by Deirdre LeFay. I really like this book for when I want to dive a bit deeper into one of Jane Austen's novels. I will pick this up and read the really excellent essays on the novels that are in here. I've just learned so much from reading this book. I always enjoy going deeper into classic novels that I love. Jane Austen is my favourite writer, so I really do very much enjoy just engaging with her novels a bit more deeply. And one of the ways that I do that is to read books like this, and it just gives me that broader understanding of the times in which Jane Austen lived, how that influenced her and her work. But there is also just really good analyses of the novels and the characters in here that I really enjoy. Another great book is John Mullen's What Matters in Jane Austen, 20 Crucial Puzzles Solved. This is so much fun, and I'd actually like to read it again because I've read this cover to cover a few times, but I'd like to go back to it again because I remember he asks such interesting questions and then answers them in a fabulous way. So the questions he asks and answers are ones like, how much does age matter in Jane Austen's books? Do we ever see the lower classes? Why is the weather important? Why is it risky to go to the seaside? How do Jane Austen's characters look? Who dies in the course of her novels? What do characters say when the heroine is not there? How much money is enough? What do characters read? Which important characters never speak in the novels? What makes characters blush? And when does Jane Austen speak directly to the reader? There are other questions as well, but that's just to give you a sample. And again, this is just such a great book for getting you to engage a bit more deeply and think more deeply about Jane Austen's novels. And John Mullen does a wonderful job in highlighting aspects of the book that you maybe hadn't really noticed before, hadn't thought much about. And it makes you just enjoy the novels that much more when you understand more about them. And I love his writing on Jane Austen, so this is a real favourite of mine. This book was a lovely gift from a friend, The Prayers of Jane Austen. And in this little volume, there's collected her 3 prayers. It's beautifully illustrated. And this is just a lovely read. If you think you've read everything Jane Austen ever wrote, you maybe haven't actually read the prayers that she wrote. And they're actually so beautiful, of course, and really worthwhile to read. So definitely one to add to your collection if you're a big Jane Austen fan. Then this is a book that I recently got, Jane Austen's Garden, a botanical tour of the classic novels by Molly Williams and illustrated by Jessica Rue. This is such a fun read. It really is beautifully illustrated. Look at those M papers. I love them. And this gives a lot of really interesting history about gardens and certain types of plants. During Jane Austen's time, a sort of history of some different plants and of gardens as well. What plants, fruits, gardens appear in the novels, why they're important. There are also little recipes like make sloe gin and other little recipes and activities sort of inspired by the books or inspired by some of the plants and flowers and fruits and things like that come up in the novels. So it just is a really sweet little book, but also inspiring and informative. So I've been really enjoying this one. I do love Jane Austen's letters, but if you don't want to read through all of them, then I think this is a wonderful compromise, because this is a selection of her letters, and I do really recommend reading them if you're a Jane Austen fan. It's always exciting to hear Jane Austen's sort of true voice that comes out in her letters, and this is a great introduction to reading her letters. Like I said, it's a selection, it's beautifully illustrated, there's information sort of given around the letters too, so you sort of understand some of the context, and it's just a really beautiful book. I mean, I love the cover, it's just gorgeous, but it's got lovely colour illustrations, sort of Regency illustrations all throughout it. So I very much recommend this. And then if you're an enormous fan of Pride and Prejudice, and I mean, who isn't really, then you might enjoy this book, Happily Ever After, Celebrating Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I love that there's a book like this that's really just about Pride and Prejudice, but it's wonderful. So there are essays in here on the book, on sort of characters from the book. So there are essays like As Charming a Creature, the heroine, Elizabeth Bennett, and Mr. Darcy is the man, the hero, Fitzwilliam Darcy. There are also other essays on things like the style of Pride and Prejudice, the famous first sentence, Delighting in the Ridiculous, other characters, Pride and Prejudice Goes Overseas, the translations, Bonnets and Bosoms, film and theatrical versions, and just lots more. So really interesting, really fun. If you're a big Pride and Prejudice fan, then do read this. If you're interested in the clothes and the fashion in Jane Austen's day, then I have two recommendations from you. They're both by Hilary Davidson. This one is Dress in the Age of Jane Austen, Regency Fashion. And this is such a good read. I've read this cover to cover because I read and reviewed this book in Salvage magazine a few years ago, and I so enjoyed it. There was so much actually I realised I didn't know about the history of dress at that time, and then not only sort of fashion and dress, but specific materials and how they came to be used and the history of those fabrics. I mean, it was just all so interesting. It's also beautifully illustrated, again, this book, and there are lots of sort of examples of the fashions talked about, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I read it cover to cover because I was reading it to review, but also because I just became completely engrossed, and I loved the history about Regency fashion, but like I said, also the sort of fabrics, and Hilary Davidson goes into what the characters in Jane Austen books would have worn, or what Jane Austen herself wore, and things like that. She kind of puts it a bit into context of Jane Austen's novels too, so there's that kind of point of reference that I enjoyed as well. But if you want a bit more specific information about what Jane Austen herself would have worn, for instance, then Hilary Davidson wrote another book, Jane Austen's Wardrobe, and this is brilliant as well. I mean, here she looks at sort of item by item of articles of clothing that Jane Austen referenced in her letters, and she sort of sets the context. There's a quote generally at the start of like what Jane Austen is describing in a letter. Then there's a bit of information and some kind of illustration given by way of example. So it's just a really great layout. This is a book that you can sort of dip in and out of. You can look at specific items of clothing that you're most interested in. You don't really have to read it from beginning to end. So I love it for that reason too, because I can just kind of pick it up and dip in and out of it and just glean interesting bits of information from it that way too, and I really enjoy it. Okay, I've just got a few more non-fiction titles and then we'll turn to fiction. I Adore This Memoir by Emma Thompson. It's all about the sort of behind the scenes of filming Sense and Sensibility. This edition includes the screenplay because Emma Thompson wrote the screenplay for the incredible film of Sense and Sensibility in which she starred. So did Kate Winslet, Alan Rickman. It's my favorite version of the novel. I think it's just incredible. So I'm a huge fan, and I just love reading her diaries, which are often hilarious, that really show you the behind the scenes of what was happening when they were filming, and it just is such a good read. If you love the film, then you definitely have to read this. Then this book was just released this year and it's such a gem. I'm really enjoying it. It's a Jane Austen year celebrating 250 years of Jane Austen. And this was written, I believe, by the curators of Jane Austen's house. And it's beautifully illustrated, lots of photographs, lots of illustration, and you go year by year through Jane Austen's house in Chawton. And there are also lovely extracts as you go through the year from Jane Austen's letters or other writing. There's information given about Jane Austen's life as well. And it just is such a great book, and I love this kind of seasonal approach to looking at Jane Austen's house and also at Jane Austen's life a bit too. I really enjoy those, seeing all the pictures of the house from all through the year. You get photos of the surrounding landscape as well, and it's just really a beautiful book. And I really do love seeing the house all through the seasons. There's a podcast that goes with the book too that's well worth listening to, so this is a real gem. And then another book about Jane Austen's house is At Home with Jane Austen by Kim Wilson, and I do love this one too because there are some beautiful photographs, and I mean it looks at different locations in which Jane Austen lived, like Bath, for instance, but there are also some lovely pictures of Chawton in here as well that I really like, and of the interiors at Chawton, Jane Austen's house at Chawton. So this is just a beautifully photographed and illustrated book, and I love this one as well. It's just nice to have such nice big pages too, so you can really appreciate the photographs and illustrations. But let's move to fiction now, and I have a pile here. I know many of you have been watching as well as reading Miss Austen by Jill Hornby. I really did enjoy the recent TV series. I read the novel when it first came out, so it was a nice reminder of it to watch the TV series. I mean, it differed a little bit from the book, but I really enjoyed it. I thought Keeley Hawes was amazing in it. I just love her. If you haven't read the book, then I really recommend reading it. And excitingly, Jill Hornby has just published a third book. So I've read Miss Austen and Godmersham Park. Miss Austen is my favourite of those two. But I've enjoyed both of the ones I've read so far, and I'm excited to read The Elopement, which sounds really good. So this is on my to-be-read list for the summer. Then The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow is one of my favourite fiction choices. But if you love Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice in particular, then do give this a read. This looks at the story of Mary Bennett, and Janice Hadlow imagines what happens to Mary once the events of Pride and Prejudice end. So this novel begins when you're still kind of in the time frame of Pride and Prejudice, but then pretty rapidly it moves beyond the time frame in Jane Austen's novel. And it's really satisfying, the story that Janice Hadlow invents for Mary. The sort of ending that she gives her in this book is lovely, and I just thought it was so well written. I really enjoyed it. So definitely this is a favourite of mine. It's also being made into a TV dramatisation, which I'm very, very excited about. Can't wait for that to come out. And that's a great excuse to reread the book. If you've already read it, I'd like to reread it, or maybe listen to it on Audible. I'd like that a lot. Geette Hair, I've already mentioned my love for Geette Hair. She wrote the most brilliant Regency romances. If you love Jane Austen, then definitely give these a read. Two of my favourites are Venetia and then The Nonsuch. Both so much fun, and she was just such a wonderful writer. And there's lots of brilliant novels that you can discover from Geette Hair as well. She was quite prolific, which is great because it means you can really get stuck in and enjoy her books. If you're craving a sort of Jane Austen-like novel, then definitely give Geette Hair a try. Joan Aiken wrote quite a few books inspired by Jane Austen's novels and telling stories of some of her characters kind of beyond the novels. One that I remember reading and enjoying is Mansfield Revisited by her. I read this a while ago and I'd actually like to read it again. I love the cover of this old version I have of it because I believe it's Angela Barrett who's illustrated it, and I think it's just lovely. You can see the back as well. Angela Barrett is one of my favourite artists, so I really love this cover. But Joan Aiken was such a great writer, and it's really fun to see what she does with some of the novels and characters, and Mansfield Revisited is one that I remember enjoying, so do give that a go as well. So one of the most famous retellings of Pride and Prejudice is, of course, Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. And it certainly is fun to give this a read. If you want a sort of modern take on Pride and Prejudice, then you can't go wrong with Bridget Jones. And then Longorn by Jo Baker is also, I think, a fantastic read. This is told from the point of view of the servants of Longbourn from Pride and Prejudice. And it was just such a clever idea to look at the characters, to look at the story of Pride and Prejudice through the viewpoint of the servants. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was exceptionally well written. Another book that actually my mum told me about, she read and enjoyed this, and it was one she kind of passed along to me to read, and that's Letters to Alice on First Reading Jane Austen by Faye Weldon. This is a novel that's told through letters. It's by a woman who I think is quite a well-known writer from what I remember. And she's responding in letters to, I believe it's her niece, who's kind of reading Jane Austen for the first time, but initially finds them sort of boring and isn't really enjoying them. So she's writing her letters to change her mind, essentially, but also they're just really interesting ideas discussed in the letters about literature generally, as well as about Jane Austen, why they're still worth reading. Yeah, there's just a lot to enjoy for a Jane Austen fan in this book. It's been quite a few years now since I read it, so I'd like to return to it myself. And then something just very light and fun, and for maybe a more modern reader, is A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. Sophie Irwin has written a couple, I think there might even be a third out now, of Regency romances. I haven't read the third one yet, but of the two published so far, this one is my favourite. It's a bit of a twist on persuasion, which is quite fun. It's about a newly widowed woman called Eliza. She's been widowed at 27, but she becomes sort of torn between two love interests. One, a sort of former flame of hers who suddenly returns, and then the other is a man that she meets when she moves to Bath, who's a bit of a notorious rake, but who definitely has a more sensitive side and is also quite a brilliant poet. It's just a fun look at Regency England, Bath in particular, and if you want a light, entertaining read, then give this one a try. So to end, I thought I would just share a couple of editions of Jane Austen books that I think are just that extra bit special. I mean, there are so many amazing editions of her books. I've shared a lot of them in the past, but these just have something unique about them. I love these editions that are curated by Barbara Heller of sort of classic novels. She's done Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, but also a couple of Jane Austen titles, Pride and Prejudice and also Persuasion. And what's special about this version of Pride and Prejudice is that it has 19 letters from the characters' correspondence written and then folded by hand that are spread throughout the book. So here's one of them. This is the infamous letter from Mr. Darcy to Elizabeth. And it's just so fun to be able to unfold these letters from the characters. I know Barbara Heller does a lot of research into what the paper would have looked like, even down to how it would have been folded, but also what style of handwriting would the characters have. I think this is exactly how Mr. Darcy would write. I love it. So it's just so much fun to be able to read the letter itself in Mr. Darcy's imagined handwriting and picture Elizabeth reading this. I just love it. So this is a very special edition of Pride and Prejudice. And then I have to say that I really love annotated editions of my sort of favourite classics, and I do very much recommend the annotated editions of Jane Austen's books. I think they're getting hard to find, so I'm not sure how available they are right now, but if you ever see one, then it's really worth grabbing. I love this one of Emma. Emma is a book I always want to return to in the summertime because it's got those famous summery scenes, the strawberry picking and then the picnic at Box Hill. So this is a book I like to return to in the summertime. So I thought I would share this annotated edition of Emma. And you can see there are just a lot of notes as well as illustrations included throughout the novel. As I said, I love Jane Austen's books so much that I actually get real pleasure in just going that bit deeper into understanding the books and reading around them. So that's a reason that I love to read some literary criticism on Jane Austen and also to read annotated versions of the books. So I love these and I wanted to tell you about them as well. Anyway, that's the enormous pile of books that I've worked my way through. I hope you found some inspiration from this video. Do let me know some of your favourite books that you think a Jane Austen fan would enjoy. I'd love to hear your recommendations as well. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye!